Hi everyone, today we are continuing our lectures and today we'll talk about real-world evidence or RWE in healthcare and how this technology is changing clinical trials and how we're able to work with real-world insights in our scientific studies. My name is Konstantin and I have experience working with startups, working with universities, and I managed to develop multiple tools using AI technologies, managing data sources, processing different complex structures related to drug discovery, to medical problem solving, and right now I'm working how to introduce these technologies in pharmaceutical industry to update current state of technology and make it more sophisticated. And real world data is one of the tools which could be successfully utilized for this purpose, and it's a quite huge area of interest, and we won't cover everything here. We will start with just basics. I will talk about what is it in general, what are the limitations of more traditional approach in controlled trials, and why real-world evidence is important here, and how it's being regulated, and based on what components these solutions are being built, and how to study data in real-world evidence, and how to work with data collection and data processing, and I will show some case studies how it's being applied. So, to start somewhere, let's say what's RWE or real-world evidence. It's evidence of the effectiveness, safety, and costs of medical technologies from real-world clinical practice. And we should compare it with clinical trials. And clinical trials are being operated under controlled conditions with strict participant selection, and when we're talking about real-world evidence, we're just working with everyday data collected from clinical practice and diverse patients and huge populations being involved in just medical treatment. Why it's important to analyze real data? Because we have a certain gaps between control studies and real-world data, and certainly we should analyze this source. And also we are able to utilize this data to support our regulatory decisions, and we are able to detect new indications, contraindications, and maybe we should adjust certain dosage, or we should try to approach with a new form of drug delivery, or there could be other types of post-marketing surveillance which are quite important. And we were able to proceed with this technology due to introduction of digital collection of patient data. So it's totally related with electronic health records and electronic health data, because it's quite difficult to analyze handwritten cases from our patients and analyze some books, and it's impossible to gather this data on a huge scale in paper-based environment. So we went into digital form starting from the century, I guess, in general, and right now we have major clinics working with digital documents, and we have this data to analyze, so that's why we're able to proceed with real-world data instead of using only randomized clinical trials. But of course, this is not a replacement for randomized clinical trials in any meaning of this term, and They will be with us, I guess, forever, and it's a golden standard for prioritized evidence gathering on drug safety and efficiency. However, after the registration, real-world data is much better because it's not affected by specific settings which are being organized in controlled clinical trials. And of course, it should be utilized for regulatory decisions, so this data should be part of the dossier for medical products on which basis these medical products are being on the market. And going back one step, what's the definition of real-world evidence? It will be clinical evidence on the use, benefits, or risks of medical technologies based on real-world data. So this data is being gathered and obtained from sources like electronic health records, EHRs, patient registries, insurance claims, and other sources. These sources will provide insights into how drugs perform in real-life conditions. It's not set up by certain company or certain scientists, it's just our practice. And of course, we have a certain position for this data in a life cycle of treatment and medical products utilization. So we have a certain hypothesis if this product will improve treatment of a certain disease. And using this data, we can confirm that it's really working in a large population. So we need to have a surveillance. Data phenotypes will be different, of course, because patients are amount of patients is much bigger than in clinical trial. There will be comorbidities when we have several diseases at the same time, and we need to work with them as a combination of treatments and diseases. Also, it's important to understand that we need to analyze outcomes on a larger scale. How this treatment affects the outcome for patients. And treatments could be different. These products will be involved in different treatment schemes, and we need to understand if it's being utilized efficiently and we really have benefit for our patients from this product. And of course, it can be used in other settings like for better diagnosis and so on. But of course, we have also certain limitations which we need to face when we are performing controlled trials. We have a limited external validity, so it's we have controlled conditions. They're not 100% correlated with real-life practice. Lack of representativeness. We will have a certain patient group, and in many cases, the elderly patients with comorbidities will be excluded because it's not safe to test certain drug on such a group. And we have, of course, limited duration of observations because we are working in a certain time frame when we need to perform our clinical trial to make this drug publicly available on the market. And if we will stay for a long period of time in certain trials, it won't be beneficial at all because we will not be able to provide this product to our patients on a general scale. And it will lead to long-term effects which could be missed in such conditions. And the controlled clinical trials are very complex, and high cost of these trials is also a problem because to introduce a new product on the market, you will need to spend a lot on these trials. And in some cases, we can think how to replace certain controlled trials with real-world evidence and data. And of course, there will be clinical, ethical issues and conflicts of interest in relation to randomized clinical trials, because we have a sponsor for this trial who is interested in making his product available on the market, and it's being regulated how these trials is being performed, and these issues are being addressed. Of course, it's so, but in general, data gathered from real-world practice could be quite different from what we have in these controlled trials. And what's the role for real-world evidence in healthcare right now? It addresses the limitations of randomized clinical trials. It was able to provide evidence of drug efficiency in routine medical practice, where it could be applied. It could be applied for drug development and registration. It could be applied for post-authorization safety and efficiency. It could be applied for clinical guidance development, health economics and reimbursement systems development, evaluation of innovative drugs and rare disease treatments. And graphically could be presented as different sources of data and how they are connected with each other. First of all, we have our experimental data, where we are able to get data from a controlled group and experimental group and compare them. It's our randomized clinical trials are working just so, and we have our experiment, so we have a hypothesis or some idea that could be confirmed during this trial if a certain effect is being caused by a certain drug, and what to have as a result. Another type of research is survey research. It's questionnaires, interviews, samples. It could be statistical data analysis, and we're working with tabular data, with charts, with graphs, and so on. We're able to analyze context, for example, texts in media, count the number of occurrences for a certain phenomenon, and we can perform meta-analysis. We're able to analyze patterns in existing research, and combining these results together will result in a general knowledge which could be quite beneficial for us, because we can rely on this data because it's based on multiple research studies. So we are able to utilize this real-world evidence as a late-stage data source, which could be assembled based on previous studies. We can analyze multiple sources of medical products being utilized to treat certain patients, and we're able to use this data. And how this data is being used right now is highly regulated with certain agencies, FDA, AMA, and it's quite important to understand at what level we're able to utilize this data and how it's being regulated. For example, in drug development, it could be used for clinical trial design, so we understand how this similar drug works in a certain medical practice, and we can use this knowledge to design a new studies for new similar drugs, for example, or somehow to modify our existing trial designs. We can use this data for patient enrollment and recruitment. So we have data how certain patients were treated. Maybe we have data about the side effects, and we are approaching with a new drug to reduce these side effects. And we can analyze similar patients with similar cases and to try a new product in this group who had this certain abnormality in treatment results. For example, they could have quite different, a bit different phenotype, and introducing another product will be beneficial for them to treat them better. It could be used to inclusion and exclusion criteria. For example, we will not try a new product which we already know could have a certain adverse reactions with the patients from a certain background, for example. We can use external control arm. It's the most interesting part of controlled randomized clinical trials, because from control clinical trial we have the word control, where we have a control group. It's a group of patients who are receiving placebo drug substitute without substance, and it shouldn't produce any treatment at all. And if we have these patients in general population who are not receiving this drug which is being tested, why do we need this control group at all? We can analyze data from similar patients from real world practice and use it as a control arm in our two-armed study. Also, we can use just for practical things like site selection and something like that. In post-approval studies, we can use this data for post-market research, for adverse reactions, for label expansion, or decision support tools, or clinical practice guidelines, so some insurance coverage, monitoring, in safety, comparative studies, and it could be quite creative here. What could be done with this data to improve existing drugs which are being already used? As I already mentioned, this technology and this data source isn't that long time present, and regulations in this area are all just being built and being introduced into the market. So we have different agencies and different authorities which are generating their own regulations on this matter. For example, from FDA will be a bit different from regulations from National Institute for Health and Care Excellence in UK, and there will be professional bodies like International Society for Pharmacoeconomics and Outcome Research, and they will have their own recommendations. And right now we're able to utilize certain regulations and follow certain guidelines working with this type of data, which are more suitable for our goals. For example, if we are going to use this data to make a certain authorization process in United States, we should follow regulations by FDA and so on and so on. So we have several different frameworks here, and these frameworks are encouraging us to use the real-world evidence for regulatory decision making. For example, to approve certain drug on the market or make some alterations in certain documents describing how this product could be utilized. And in EMA, there is a support for the use of real-world evidence for drug development and regulatory processes. In UK, this guidance will be related for real-world evidence to support reimbursement decisions. And this area is changing quite fast, and it's evolving with our understanding how to work with this data. And at the same time, these regulations are being updated, and they're facing these challenges. And for example, EMA and FDA, they are going into understanding how to utilize real-world evidence as a key source of regulatory information. And in UK, these protocols are being introduced as a templates for real-world evidence research to standardize approach for this research. And I hope that in a quite close time we will have a harmonized guidance for the whole this area, and it will cover multiple aspects of data utilization in relation to real-world evidence. And for example, in European Union, this initiative is being called Darwin. It's data analysis and real-world interrogation network, and it delivers real-world evidence from across the Europe on diseases, population, and use of certain medicines, and it enables EMA and national competent authorities in member states to use this data whenever this data is needed through the whole life cycle of medical products. And this data is being used to support regulatory decision making by establishing and expanding a catalog of observed data sources for use of medical regulations. And also it's providing a source for high quality validated real world data and safety issues and efficiency of the medicine. So you are able to utilize this information to understand which products should be used in which case. Also, it's addressing specific questions by carrying out high-quality, non-interventive studies, by including developing scientific protocols, interrogation, relevant data sources, and interpreting and reporting study results. So it's quite a sophisticated initiative that's being carried out right now. And also, there is international collaboration to integrate real-world evidence into regulatory decision-making, and there are several organizations working in this area, like EMA, FDA, and Health Canada, and it's more like a statement how this evidence should be implemented in regulatory decision-making. They are working on harmonization of real-world data and real-world evidence terminologies, generating common operational definitions for them, how to address granularity of this data, and how to leverage existing activities. So this could be quite important to update other documents in regulations to address these changes in data gathering process, and how, for example, could be designed pharmacoepidemiological studies to utilize this source of data in medicine. Also, it's very important to understand how to work with these sources, how to control data quality, how to utilize metadata, and use this data to characterize certain data source, and what are the right scenarios here, existing use cases, which templates could be used, and how to analyze readiness to use this data in regulatory decision, how to make this data gathering and data processing transparent for all involved parties, and at the same time to keep it, first because it's related to private data, keep it safe and unaffected by different cybersecurity threats. And it's also a quite vast area of work. So, National Institute for Clinical Excellence in UK are working on framework for real-world evidence, and there are recommendations that guide decisions in public health and social care. And these recommendations are aimed at utilization of this data for improvement of care for the patients, and it also highlights why randomized clinical trials are not the best choice in many cases. For example, it could be unethical, it would meet certain needs of the patients, and patients are unwilling to be allocated for such interventions, and healthcare professionals are unwilling to use this randomization because in this case they will treat one patient and will not treat another one who's in a control group, and for many doctors it will be considered unethical because if they are able to help, they should help. And there will be a small number of eligible patients, financial, technical constraints, and it's hard to analyze how this treatment will be working in a combination, because in a trial they will try to use only minimal amount of ongoing treatments, which could be irrelative for real world situation. So to proceed with high quality real world evidence, we need to study design, to align this design with our objectives, purpose, protocol development should be in place, and it should be aligned with real world evidence. Data quality is also very important because we need to utilize, it will be based on how we are utilizing this data, how we are assembling this, how the data is being gathered, governed, transformed, loaded, and so on. Which are the analytical methods being used here? What tools we're using to analyze this data? What we're going to do to make this transparent and reproducible? How we will ensure the predictability of research and reporting transparency? And how we will evaluate this data to prepare our final report and ensure decision makers can access study in a required level of quality. So to proceed with study design, we will understand the clear research objectives for the study and what will be our aim, efficiency, safety, or something else. And key considerations here will be to have a certain strategy, defining the purpose, how we are going to operate with this data, how we're going to find this data, make it available, feasible, and how we will ensure quality of this data. And also, this study should be aligned with other research approaches and other research already done. And there should be a retrospective database of studies for on a similar purpose, on a similar drug, and with which studies we are going to compare our results. And the general algorithm of the study design will look like we need to find our purpose of study and strategy considerations. We should define outcome categories, data collection needs and select how it could be done using this data. And data sources to analyze will be, as already told, health records from our patients, patient registries, different databases, different clinical trial data, which we already could have on similar drug. Talking about data preparation, we need to have steps for data cleaning, data preprocessing, and quality assurance. Actually, it's a huge problem because in real world, we don't have a goal to assemble all the data in a clear way, so it will be analyzed in future studies, and doctors will be considering, healthcare professionals in general will be considering only that part of information as necessary on which they are working by themselves, and if there is something which they are not using and consider just additional information which isn't required, and we are going to use this data in our study, there could be a problem because quality will be low and we will not have enough data, and or it could be just something typical which will not be entered, will be entered for each patient by default, and it will not provide us any meaningful information at all. And we need to analyze in relation to each data column if it's being gathered correctly, and if it's possible to rely on this data source. So it's a quite important field to work here. And we're able to utilize structured and unstructured data, for example, to extract data from a text, or we can use tabular data already entered in a structured format. We'll need to work with missing data and how to maintain reliability in these data sources. We need to find and address data inconsistencies, and it's very important, as I already mentioned. What are the data characteristics in real-world evidence? It will be primary purpose of this data, how we're going to use this data in support of our healthcare system operations. And data structure is also quite important because we will be able to use structured data, and unstructured data will require additional preprocessing. If we have certain missing data, we need to understand how to work with these entries. Should they be excluded, or should something be provided as a substitution here, or we could try to calculate this data on some additional sources and to add this data in our dataset. And of course, the inconsistencies also should be analyzed. Also, we have a certain templates right now which could be helpful for real-world evidence study design. For example, Harper template, Space Tool, and NICE protocols are quite important in this area, and they are very helpful to provide us with all the requirements which we need to fulfill to work with certain data, so in ways that it will be useful for us as a source for real-world evidence later. So we should utilize these protocols and templates to proceed with our studies and use them as a guidance. And it's quite important to understand that real-world evidence is 100% relying on data science, so we're able to utilize certain techniques to work with this data, and for example, they will be data integration. We're able to merge data from multiple sources, registries, health records, and based on these multiple sources, we are able to define a common data set, which will be later used in the studies. Data cleaning and preprocessing also could be automated with data science and data management tools, and based on these structures we should define our features which could be utilized later in our models. For example, we will be able to identify key variables here from raw data, and which this key variable could be used as a predictive tool in our predictive model. And of course, we'll use statistical methods here, utilizing causal inference and hypothesis testing to derive actionable insights from this data. Predictive modeling is also quite common in this field. We're using machine learning techniques to predict patient outcome and drug efficiency. And of course, there will be multiple visualization tools, and they're quite useful to show to stakeholders insights based on this data, because in many cases it will be much more useful to provide this data in charts or graphs or diagrams. Just a few words should be mentioned about data sources. For example, already mentioned clinical data. It could be longitudinal data from, for example, chronic conditions. It's also very important to gather this data from for a long period of time to analyze how certain treatment is affecting conditions of this group of patients. Health insurance claims from billing and services used, we can have quite important insights. Wearable devices and sensors. We are going full speed ahead in life when our health is being supported by different devices, gathering data, and of course we should utilize this data in these studies. And patient-reported outcomes, quite efficient here. It's data provided directly by patients about their health status. So we can provide such tools to gather these outcomes from our patients directly. And data scientific methods could be used for data normalization, for example, standardizing formats, units of measurement. We can utilize different ontologies to use similar names for certain entities in these datasets. We could utilize data governance tools to ensure compliance with privacy and other regulations in this area. And of course, we'll use techniques related to data engineering, how to store this data correctly, how to provide access to this data. And right now, everything is changing in relation to this field. We are going to cloud platforms, and in major cases, this information will be stored in cloud data storages. Actually, there's quite a lot of ways how we can get these evidences which we're going to use in our clinical decisions or regulatory decisions, and these evidences will be with a different level of sophistication, and the most reliable are systematic reviews which were generated on top of various types of studies, for example, randomized studies, cohort studies, case studies, and background information gathered from multiple sources. And we are able to correspond this real-world evidence data with this structure as a quite high-level source of truth, because we will have multiple studies under this data gathered in a combination. So just a few words about data sources once again, and already mentioned health records and administrative data could be used here. For example, when certain patient was admitted, and information gathered from reimbursement also could be used here. So if we do not have a certain data in clinical data sets, we are able to utilize administrative data from finance, from something related to administrative issues on a certain hospital could be utilized. The same thing with insurance claims, which could be analyzed. Patient registries, for example, cancer registry could be utilized to analyze how drug treatment is being resulted on the patients who are in this registry. And another example, okay, cystic fibrosis registry collects data on people with this disease, and analyzing this data could be utilized to improve health of people with such a condition. For example, another example already mentioned, patient-generated data was utilized during coronavirus for safe reporting during this period, and this data could be also used. And of course, we can use retrospective charts, which are quite common in such studies, which could be used to analyze history of disease and treatment pathways. Also, we can work with clinical audits to analyze current standards of care and how they were implemented in real practice. Another examples could be related to biobanks. For example, they're collecting data on patient medical histories and genetics, and they're linked to patient records for health outcomes. So we can use this data to design a specific research question to work with these data sources, and it will be quite effective. And another example is multicenter prospective cohort study to evaluate local tumor control and morbidity in patients undergoing MRI-based image-guided adaptive brachytherapy for local advanced cervical tumors. Another examples, health survey for England in the annual representative household survey measuring trends in healthcare, and they were measuring, for example, lipidemia, and collected patient experience data from individuals with lipedema, and it evaluates experience of patients having non-cosmetic liposuction or other treatments of lipedema. So, which data scientific techniques could be used to work in this field? First of all, it will be natural language processing for key instructions, gathering from unstructured clinical notes and patient-reported outcomes. Another one will be converting free text data from EHRs and social media into structured, analyzable data. Another tools will be more classic ones like machine learning and predictive analytics, identifying high-risk patient cohorts for early interventions and predicting drug adherence for hospitalization risks and how certain disease will progress in such a treatment. And another one will be Causal Inference and other scoring metrics, and they're able to identify causal relations in observed data and they will help us to reduce biases when comparing treatment effects in non-randomized datasets. Other one will be time series analysis, analyzing patient trajectories, treatment responses, and health status changes over time. It could be useful in pharmacovigilance to detect trends or anomalies in adverse effects reporting. And of course, it will be data visualization and storytelling. For data visualization, we're able to utilize Power BI, Tableau, or Python libraries like Matplotlib, Seaborn to create dashboards. And we're able to utilize textual models like large language models to transform complex insights into clear and actionable descriptions in stories for stakeholders. So how to proceed with data analysis in this area? First of all, we need to define research question, determine clinical problem which we are going to solve, and regulatory goals that could be addressed, and so on and so on. And after that, we need to allocate our data sources, proceed with data collection, integration. So data engineering is quite important here. We need to identify and merge data sources like EHR records, claims, wearable data, and so on. After that, we'll need to proceed with data cleaning and pre-processing to address missing data or duplicates and inconsistencies here. And after that, we should proceed with exploratory data analysis and define trends, patterns, and relationships in the data. And next step will be feature engineering for extracting relevant features to improve model performance. After that, we will be able to proceed with model development to use machine learning, natural language processing, and causal inference models here. Next step will be evaluation and validation for this data to understand if these findings could be used in our pipeline and in our decision making. And next step, the last one, will be report generation and visualization to share these insights with relative stakeholders and decision makers. So we will have to finalize with some clean and addressable report here. Some examples of case studies how this is being used in practice. For example, in relation to drug safety, we need to identify potential adverse drug reactions on the post-market approval. Data sources will be adverse event reporting systems from regulatory bodies. It will be patient-reported data from side effects on social media and relative forums or networks. And we will proceed with natural language processing to extract key terms like, for example, headache or nausea from unstructured data, sentiment analysis to analyze patient comments for positive or negative sentiment, and we will need to have anomaly detection here to identify sudden spikes in adverse events mentioned. And as a result, we'll have a tool to detect a potential drug safety issue related to a combination of a certain name of a drug and a certain mentioned side effects with a certain sentiment in one sentence or in one abstract, or other measures could be used to calculate if they're connected. Another example could be provided as how this data was used in relation to coronavirus treatment. We had evidence generation based on outcomes, mortality, ongoing studies, citations in literature, and this data was combined in common space to provide recommendations how certain treatment could be used in a certain way, and For example, how this certain drug, dexamethasone, is being related to certain evidences, and should it be used for the treatment here, or something like that. Let's name some techniques and technologies in data processing which could be utilized for real-world evidence, and in data engineering and the pipeline of data extraction, transformation, and loading will be quite useful to use Apache Airflow, SQL language, different databases like Snowflake, or data processing tools like AWS Glue. So there are different tools to organize a pipeline for data extraction, transforming, and loading. And for data cleaning and preparation, we're able to utilize Python libraries like Pandas or NumPy. We can utilize R with tools like dplyr or tidyr, and machine learning could be used here to work with data, utilizing different libraries like scikit-learn, TensorFlow, PyTorch for models. And in natural language processing, we're using Spacey, NLTK, Hugging Face transformers, BERT, and of course we'll need to have statistical tools. It could be also done in R, ggplot, Caret, or in Python, stats model, SciPy, and data visualization could be done, as already mentioned, in Tableau, Power BI, or Python libraries are also quite efficient here, like Seaborn, Plotly, and Matplotlib. And of course, we are going to clouds, and the cloud platforms provide multiple tools for data, and we have AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, and they provide quite similar tools with different names. And a couple of screenshots in Apache Airflow. We can build a pipeline defining each step in data processing. In the Google, it will be in Dataproc, and similar tools will be in different environments. The AWS provides AWS Glue, so it's quite similar. Power BI for data visualization. And I guess one of the last things, but not less important, is ethical and legal considerations. So we need to work with this data under constraints from GDPR and HIPAA for sensitive data, because we are working with patient data. There are different tools to remove personally related information, identifiables like PII, personal identifiable information issues in datasets. We should have data consents from patients to use this data on the purpose which we are going to do with this data. So the basics of GDPR, and we should use this data on principles of fairness to avoid biases in predictive models. And it's important because in later stages these biases will affect treatment of future patients. And we need to describe transparency issues to maintain this data reproducible and explainable in our structures. It could be quite important because we need to address how this data was analyzed for regulatory issues. So to wrap up, I will just mention benefits from real-world evidence, like it's reflecting more broader patient populations. It will be retrospective, as we're working with existing data, and it's much faster to analyze this data than to start gathering from scratch It will be cost effective because we're able to work with existing data sources. And in many cases, it could be quite efficient in regulatory decision support because we're working with products which are already in the market, and we have data how these products were utilized. Were they efficient or not? Were there a lot of side effects, other being used in correct settings with the correct diagnosis procedures and diagnostic procedures, or additional treatments and additional procedures? So it could be quite efficient. And just a few words about future. Here we will have standardization of this guidances. So we will have an unified field of knowledge here, unified protocols. Of course, there are a huge burden from AI and machine learning, which is affecting this area, and these tools are being improved every day, and we need to understand how to get the best from these tools in relation to clinical data. And also this data could be used in personalized medicine, so we are able to analyze real-world evidence from just a certain person, and it will be totally personalized for you if you will have all the data based on your treatments, diagnostics, and your health conditions. And it could be quite beneficial to address your needs more efficiently and effectively. So real-world evidence is a major pillar right now in transforming healthcare decision-making and addressing limitations from research being processed in regulated boundaries, and it's quite important issue for regulatory agencies right now, and in many cases we will rely on this data in future in a greater scale. So thanks for your attention, and I hope you will have a nice day.